I don't know what it is, but almost every single kid I've ever met seems to love trains. Heck, I love trains. And so this is a great book for all the train lovers out there. It's also got cowboys and adventure and a hurricane and flying porcupines and just an amazing display of wordsmithery. Wordsmithery? Is that even a word? I don't know. Anyway, check it out. You're gonna love Railroad John and the Red Rock Run.
The sagebrush flyer came roaring down Coyote Pass, whistled twice and pulled into the Sugar City station. There on the platform stood Lonesome Bob and Granny Applefritter. "Howdy, Granny," said Railroad John. "Howdy, Lonesome. Where you off to all dressed up?"
"Lonesome aims to get hitched today," said Granny Applefritter. "The wedding's in Red Rock at 2 o'clock, and we can't be a minute late."
"Well, it's a mighty fine day for marrying," said Railroad John. "The flyer hits Red Rock at exactly 1:59. I've driven this train for 40 years, and we've never been late once yet." "Who's the lucky lady?" asked Railroad John.
"I aim to marry Wildcat Annie," said Lonesome Bob. "She's wild as a panther, but sweet as a honeybee's gold tooth."
Then he picked up his guitar box and plucked himself out of tune.
"Oh, I've been lonesome all my life, but I'll never more lonesome be, for I'm heading to Red Rock to meet my bride. Wildcat Annie's a girl for me." "You're a good boy, Lonesome," said Granny Applefritter.
The sagebrush flyer highballed it down the tracks, lickety-whoop and whoopity-lick. They roared around Dead Man's Curve and, whoa! Railroad John slammed on the brakes. Smack dab in the middle of the track sat Bad Bill, the vilest, orneriest outlaw that ever scuffed up dust. He was sitting aback Flame, his famous fire-breathing palomino, and they were both looking testy as scorpions with the prickly heat.
"Now, Railroad John, I don't mean you no harm," Bad Bill said, "but poor Flame here is plumb out of grub, and he don't have much fire left in him. Show him, Flame."
Flame let go a huff and a puff. Bad Bill was right. It wasn't enough spark to kindle dry straw.
"Flame needs him some fire-stoking victuals," said Bad Bill, "so we'll be obliged to take that coal you're carrying."
Bad Bill and his outlaw gang loaded up 27 tow sacks of Railroad John's coal and hightailed it off. There sat the sagebrush flyer, chugging its last chug, and not a pebble of coal left. "Well, this is a vexation," said Railroad John.
"Now don't you worry, Railroad," said Granny Applefritter. "Looky here what I got."
It was a heaping platter of Granny's special hard-shell chili pepper corn pone muffins that she'd baked for the wedding feast. Now everybody knows that Granny Applefritter's hard-shell chili pepper corn pone muffins are hot enough to set fire to an iceberg, so Railroad John stoked them into the firebox. Sure enough, the sagebrush flyer came roaring back to life. Railroad John gave it the steam, and off they dartled, rockety-pop and poppity-rock. He looked at his watch. "Well, now we're running 12 minutes behind," he said, "but we can make up the time once we hit Sulphur Flats." Lonesome Bob looked grim as a mule eating briars. He picked up his guitar box and plucked himself out of tune.
"Oh, Wildcat Annie waits for no one, so my troubles are plain to see. If I don't make it to Red Rock on time, there'll be no marrying for me." "You're a good boy, Lonesome," said Granny Applefritter.
"Don't you worry," said Railroad John. "I've driven this train for 40 years, and we've never been late once yet." The sagebrush flyer went callahooting down the tracks, mickety-tuck and tuckety-mick, blowing steam so peppery hot it made the crow's eyes water 32 miles away. On they flew through Cayuse Canyon and Vulture's Gap. Then just around Horseshoe Bend they ran bang straight into the fiercest rainstorm that ever was. Thunder rolled out like cannon shot, and lightning bullwhipped fire across the sky. The rain was so thick you could float toads on it. The sagebrush flyer roared out over Eagle's Draw, down toward Cripplesome Creek, and whoa! Up ahead the bridge was washed clean away. But the sagebrush flyer just kept on flying. The tracks were too slick for them to stop. Lonesome Bob thought fast. He unhooked 4 of his guitar box strings and lashed them together for a lariat. Crack! Another lightning bolt ripped through the clouds. Lonesome Bob lassoed the forked end and whipped it down over the creek just in time. The sagebrush flyer sailed right across. Railroad John looked at his watch. 22 minutes behind, he said, but we're coming into Sulphur Flats. We'll make that time up now. I've driven this train for 40 years and we've never been late once yet. But just then the sagebrush flyer blurped out a cough and a wheeze and a splurt and puttered to a stop. They'd used up the last of Granny's hard-shelled chili pepper corn pone muffins. There they sat, flim-flum in the middle of Sulphur Flats without a crumb of fuel left. Lonesome Bob was in a state. He was squeezing out tears the size of elephants' eggs. He picked up his guitar box and plucked himself out of tune.
Oh, I'll never make it to Red Rock on time. Wildcat Annie, I'll never more see. Oh, I've been lonesome all my life, and now I'll ever more lonesome be. Times is hard all over, said Granny Apple Fritter.
But that wasn't the end of their troubles. The weather was going from rough to rocky, and now the wind was whipping up ugly and mean. They looked out and a cloud of feathers came flying past. Then they saw the chickens. A clump of needles came flying by. Then they saw the porcupine. A slosh of milk came flying by. Then they saw the cow. Then over the hill, bearing straight down on them, came a sure enough Idaho spine twiner. "Great jumping Johnny cakes!" cried Railroad John. "Hold on to your boots, we're in for a blow." Here came the whirlywinds, swirling and a-twirling, looping and a-swooping. It scooped up the sagebrush flyer and spun it away, out across Sulphur Flats, twirling and a-swirling around and around. "Woo-hoo!" cried Railroad John. "Woo-hoo!" cried Granny Apple Fritter. Then, just as fast as it started, the whole thing was over. That whirlywinds gave them one last swirl and set them down, train and all, gentle as a baby bundle, right gum dab in front of the Red Rock station. Railroad John let out a whoop. "Woohoo! 1:59 exactly. Yes, I've driven this train for 40 years and we've never been late once yet." "Let's skedaddle," said Lonesome Bob. Wildcat Annie's a-waiting for me." So Railroad John, Lonesome Bob, and Granny Apple Fritter vamoosed down to the Red Rock Chapel, and there, waiting for them, was nary a soul. "Well, it's not quite 2:00, said Granny, but Lonesome Bob was looking solemn as cold mush. The clock ticked off 2:00, then 2:01, then 2:02. "Well, that's all she wrote," said Lonesome Bob. "Looks like there won't be any marrying after all." But just then they heard a rootin' and a tootin', a shootin' and a hootin', thunderin' up over the hill came Wildcat Annie along with Grandpa Krusty Huckabuck and a whole passel of other folks. Wildcat Annie roared up like a dust storm riding an avalanche. "Yee-haw!" she whooped. "Howdy, Lonesome. Sorry I'm running a mite behind. These here outlaw varmints tried to get feisty with us, and we had to jerk a knot in their hindquarters." It was Bad Bill and his gang. "I believe this belongs to the sagebrush flyer," Annie said, handed Railroad John 27 tow sacks full of coal. "And look at what I baked for you, Granny." It was a heaping platter of hard-shelled chili pepper corn pone muffins. "I know how much you love 'em." "You're a good girl, Wildcat," said Granny Apple Fritter. "Yee-haw!" hollered the bride. "Now then, I thought there was to be a marrying here today." She handed Lonesome Bob his wedding present, a brand new set of guitar box strings. Then she picked up her banjo box and plucked herself out of tune.
Oh, I've been a wildcat all my life, and I'll ever a wildcat be. But a never more wildcat all alone. Lonesome Bob's a boy for me.
So Wildcat Annie and Lonesome Bob were married that afternoon. And my, oh my, you never saw such a wedding. There was singing and dancing, hooting and hollering, jack-a-napping and rusty cutting. Why, Granny Apple Fritter and Grandpa Krusty Huckabug even did a little courting and sparking themselves. And Railroad John stayed 14 minutes later than he should have. But he wasn't worried at all. He knew he'd make his next stop on time. "I've driven this train for 40 years," he said, "and we never been late once yet."